start? My name is Nadeem. I'm a city councilor in Cambridge. I'm going to talk a little bit about my experience in innovation and research on the African continent in a moment. But first, I just want to introduce our kind of first speakers. I'm introducing the introducees, and they're going to let us know about WARA and about Seeding Labs. The first, Professor Pearl Robinson, who is a board member of the West African Research Association and former president of the African Studies Association, will come up, I think, and say a few words about WARA, and then we'll hear a little bit about Seeding Labs as well.
Okay, and is there a particular place I should stay?
Podium is good. Here is even better, probably.
Good evening, everybody. As I said, I'm Pearl Robinson, and I'm a board member of WARA, which is the West Africa Research Association, which has a partner that's based in Dakar, Senegal, that's called WARC, the West African Research Center. We're one of the two organizations that is being featured at the event this evening. Let me just say a few words about WARA. WARA, we don't have anything visible for tactile for you to see here tonight, except for some board members and one of our members on the panel. But in the slideshow, you can see some pictures of some of our grantees and the kinds of work they do. WARA has been in business for roughly 20 years, during which time we've given over 120 grant awards, 34 of which were in the natural sciences. About a quarter of our grantees have been women, and we do as much as we can to encourage scholarship and professional development of people, women as well as men. We also have make it possible to do residencies. Is this whoever is in charge of this? I see blank screen, so I'm not quite sure what happened. We make it possible for scholars who are based in West Africa to do residencies here at universities in the United States. So far, we have hosted or made it possible for 19 West African scholars coming from 8 different countries to do residencies in 14 different universities here in the United States. They come from a range of fields, including emergency medicine, biology, paleontology, fish pathology, journalism, education, and women's studies. Essentially what we do then is we provide scholarship, fellowship help for people who are engaged in academic careers related to Africa. Though we have a large number of members based here in the United States, now we are prioritizing our grants to scholars who live and work on the African continent. We see this as our contribution to capacity building. I personally have taught at 2 universities in Africa, Kennedy University in Uganda and University of Dar es Salaam in Tanzania, and I have affiliations with 2 West African universities. University of Abu Mumuni in Niger and University of Legon in Ghana. And in each of these instances, what has been very clear to me is that the bulk of the people who are educated in Africa are being educated at universities in Africa. Most people think, oh, if we can get more people to come over here and go to our great universities, that's great. Most of those people will probably work elsewhere. The ones who are doing the work on the continent are the ones who find it quite difficult often to get help. And so that's what we're trying to prioritize in our work and in collaboration with scholars here. So for those of you who are sort of thinking about ways in which you can help do more on the continent of Africa, I encourage you to think about us. I'm going to just close by making a reference to one of our board members, Louise Badien, who is Senegalese, is currently on the in Senegal doing research. She is a medical anthropologist and a registered nurse. And her communications from Senegal right now, which is one of the countries where Ebola is present, have been very useful for us in terms of thinking about what kinds of responses are most appropriate if we want to try to do something about Ebola. And she too emphasizes the importance of building local capacity. So I thank all of you for coming, and I hope you will enjoy the evening.
Thank you. Next we'll hear from Nadeem, the CEO of Seeding Labs.
I'm not going to stand at the podium. Thank you so much, Nadeem. I want to say first and foremost thank you to everybody for being here tonight. Thank you in particular to Travis McCready from the Boston Foundation for being here tonight, and to Catherine and Lee and everyone at the Boston Foundation for all of the incredible hard work leading up to tonight's event. Thanks, of course, to Microsoft for giving us this beautiful space and a wonderful view. And thank you all for being here together to share it with us. Seeding Labs, as many of you know, because I say this all the time, Seeding Labs was founded on a core conviction, a sure knowledge that talent is everywhere. Talent is everywhere. And I do not have to convince you of this, because if you look around this room, you are living it. I guarantee that the vast majority of us in this room tonight are not here because we were born and raised in Cambridge, Massachusetts. And collectively, you represent villages and cities and towns across the country and across the world. You are proof positive. You are living proof that people with intelligence and ambition and a desire to solve difficult problems and make a difference in the world, that people like that are found everywhere. Seeding Labs is committed to helping, to ensure that talented people everywhere have the tools to put their talent to work. What we do at Seeding Labs is invest in exceptional scientists who are in settings and countries around the world where they may have limited resources, but they have limitless potential. We provide reduced cost lab equipment and training and foster connections among scientific professionals worldwide. And actually, many of you have been involved in helping us since our founding in 2008 to provide equipment and training to over 15,000 scientists in 22 countries around the world. Together, what we are doing with them and with you is expanding access to vital research, enhancing the impact of higher education, and creating a more connected global scientific community. And what I'm so excited about having you all here with us tonight is that our speakers tonight exemplify that vision. Every single one of our speakers is working at the cutting edge of his field, is training the next generation of scientific professionals. And above all, and most interesting to me, is doing this at the nucleus of intercontinental research networks. I'm so excited to welcome all of you here tonight. I'm particularly grateful to all of our speakers and our moderator for coming a variety of long distances to be here and to share the research with us. I'm looking forward to a fantastic conversation among us all. Thank you so much for being here, and welcome.
And an excellent introduction to the evening. Next we're going to hear from Travis McCready of the Boston Foundation. I just want to read his praises here because they are significant. Travis McCready is the Vice President for Program at the Boston Foundation, directing the distribution of nearly $20 million in discretionary grants through a competitive process and overseeing more than 22 staff members who work collaboratively to support nonprofit organizations and programs that serve the people of Greater Boston. I'm going to skip the entire next paragraph, which talks about how he has headed the Kendall Square Association and created culture in and around the Kendall Square area, how he's been the former COO and CFO of the Massachusetts Convention Center Authority, how he served as the Chief of Staff of the Boston Foundation and Director of Community Affairs for Harvard University, and now he's been named a 40 under 40. So that's the abridged version of the paragraph I just skipped. 40 under 40 in the Boston area, really auspicious distinction. Travis received his BA from Yale and JD from the University of Iowa and began his law career as a corporate attorney in Minneapolis. Aside from his duties at the foundation, Travis serves on the boards of the American Repertory Theater in Cambridge, the Massachusetts Institute for a New Commonwealth, the Center for Collaborative Leadership at UMass Boston, the Community Charter School of Cambridge. In 2011, he was appointed to the Governor's Economic Development Planning Council, where he co-chaired the Subcommittee on Innovation and Entrepreneurship. He is a frequent speaker on economic development strategy as it relates to the convergence of private, public, and not-for-profit institutional sectors. Give it up for Travis McCready. Can he live up to it? I know he can.
I thought I was just supposed to say welcome. But after that, Councilman, that was very generous introduction. I am not going to say too much because I am desperate to hear from you all. But let me frame for a second why it's important for me and important for the Boston Foundation to be here. And it's really turns on two reasons. First is through a platform that we have called the Giving Common and Giving Common Challenge. What you don't see right now is taking place is a little bit of a wee bit of a boxing match between two organizations who are looking to raise as much money as they possibly can in the next couple of days. We're kicking this off tonight. Boston Foundation made a modest contribution, and we'll be making a modest contribution to both of you. But that's just seed money for you all and for the rest of the community to help have these two organizations actualize their vision. Log on to givingcommon.org, find these two organizations, learn all about them. And I hope that at the conclusion of this evening and the conclusion of your research on the Giving Common, you will find that these organizations are worthy of your time and of your capital and your support. The second reason why transition is important to me and important to us at the Boston Foundation is something my grandfather told me. Grandfather always used to say, act locally or think globally. Act locally or think globally. I was thinking about that yesterday when I picked up my copy of the Financial Times. I've been subscribing to the Financial Times now for about 15 years. And lo and behold, you open up yesterday's Financial Times, and there's a section, I don't know if you saw it, but there's a section dedicated to the new Africa. And the entire section was dedicated to this concept that on the continent, economic development was no longer going to be driven by what was going to be extracted from the ground, but extracted from one's mind. How economic development was going to be driven by this concept of innovation and scientific innovation, and it gave all these lovely charts and graphs about how sub-Saharan Africa is increasing its investments towards innovation pursuits, doubling from $1.7 billion to right around 3.1, 3.2. In Northern Africa, is following suit and doing the same. There's 2030, a vision for 2030, innovation on the continent. As I'm reading this piece, what's happening on the continent, it was not lost on me that this is precisely the same pursuit, precisely the same thing that we're doing here locally in Boston. Nadeem is part of this movement of understanding that no longer can we rest on our laurels when driving economic development and sort of just focus on low growth opportunities. We have to, as Nina suggested, we have to embrace this concept that innovation is going to come from the unlikeliest or perhaps likeliest sources. It will come from black and brown. It will come from women. It will come from girls. It will come from people who are in different socioeconomic strata than we are sort of programming ourselves to believe that innovation comes from. We're in this process of redesigning how we think about entrepreneurship. And entrepreneurship doesn't just happen in Silicon Valley or in Kendall Square or in the Boston Innovation District. It also happens in Mattapan and Roxbury. It happens in Revere. It happens in Chelsea. It happens with little brown boys and girls. It happens with Asian boys. It happens wherever there is an opportunity for an idea to be planted and for an idea to be an individual to be supported. This is our conviction at the Boston Foundation. This is in part what we use our $1 billion endowment towards. We have an economic development strategy that is squarely focused and squarely targeted just on this concept that innovation and entrepreneurship can spring forth and will spring forth from Black and brown. I took a little bit of an issue with this concept of the new Africa, because as these gentlemen know, and those scholars in the room know, and those of you who will take my words and go back and do the research, this concept of innovation and entrepreneurship and extracting ideas from the mind has been at the core of African culture and the core of the continent for thousands of years. This is not new Africa in that regard. This is the rebirth. This is the rebirth of an ethos that has been driving African culture for thousands of years. As I think of that, it's the same thing, the same exact concept in our neighborhoods. This is nothing new that we're doing. This is nothing new that we're talking about. This is what created America in the first place. Take a look at any city, any major metropolitan area across the United States of America. Any one, choose one, and you will see that it was immigrants, Black and brown, Eastern European, people who were coming here to this country with nothing. They were the individuals who were not looked upon as being the innovators. They were not the Henry Fords, but they sure became them. They became the Andrew Carnegies. This is what we do. This is what America is all about. This is what neighborhood economic development looks like. It's not new. We're just rebirthing. So with that, I really look forward to all of your comments this evening. Thank you for being here, for traveling from as far as you have. Thank you to these two wonderful organizations. Please, please, please pull out your wallets, pennies, dollars, large dollars. Support them. Thank you again for being here this evening.
Thank you to Travis and to the other Boston Foundation colleagues who joined you here tonight. Certainly the work the Boston Foundation does in our communities is substantial, and working towards sustainable change and consistent reform and consistent rebirth is something that's, I think, on the lips of everyone, almost everyone in this room. I want to acknowledge the huge effort that's been put in by the volunteers and by the helpers and by the collaborators involved in this event. So to that end, I want to say that the WARA volunteer team needs a round of applause. So if you've been on that team, please yeah, be acknowledged. And Megan Davis, if we could get a hand leading that team. Yeah. I also want to thank our videographer, James Boyd, caterer, Mary Tensil, the Seating Labs team, Catherine Scott, and Lee Henshaw of the Boston Foundation Giving Common, and Amy Sprung of Microsoft, without whom this room would not have been possible. So truly a wonderful vista that we look out over. And lastly, a big round of applause for Stephanie Jurand, who has organized this event, has brought it all together, and I think without whom we can be very sure this would not be possible. So thank you. Good. I'm supposed to say things. Like Travis, I will try to be brief, but I would very much like to get to our speakers, so I'll try to keep it at this one page of hastily scribbled notes. I am an Egyptian American. I may be probably I'm the first Arab American on Cambridge City Council, certainly the first Muslim American in the role, and it has been an incredible journey, I think, for Arabs and Muslims in this country both as we make space for ourselves here, but also as we look back, in my case, at the homeland on the continent. I've spent time in Rwanda working with government and thinking about ICT, internet communications technology. I've spent time in Egypt working a great deal to figure out, as I think many of the speakers have already said, how we can extract the knowledge that is already there, how we can work with people who have studied and stayed, people who have left and come back, the minority though they may be, and really activate economic ecosystems, academic ecosystems, and a whole host of other things. I'm just going to run through then kind of what I've been up to when I go to Egypt and elsewhere on the continent. I started actually as a kind of identity self-discovery project and studied abroad in Egypt. And the first thing I discovered that was really interesting, MIT makes it really difficult to study abroad. It's very easy to go to China, very easy to go to Israel, very easy to go to Italy, very difficult to go to Egypt. And I think that might be changing now, but that says something, I think, in itself, and that is true for destinations all over Africa. You don't really reach back to your roots and do the research. It may be more difficult to innovate because it may be more difficult to get there through your academic institution. But I guess the thing I was supposed to be doing there is Islamic comparative constitutionalism and sociology, and that's certainly where I was physically. But intellectually and on weekends and after school, I was in the desert researching desert agriculture. I was in with what they call the Zebelin, looking at the recycling economy. The Zebelin do some of the highest percent of recycling for the entire Greater Cairo metropolitan area based on an informal economy of true reuse and true recycling of materials. Certainly there are factories there, but it's an incredible sector for innovation that has been going strong for decades. And exists as its own civil society entity and innovation force. I have seen in Egypt, as I have seen all over Eurasia, every type of innovation in every type of space. I think that was referenced before. But you see a TIG welder or MIG welder in there fixing cars and making art at the same time. You see that person making structures for biology research and fume hoods and all kinds of other things. And these are happening, paces from a sand dune where bananas are being farmed through drip irrigation and hundreds of meters away from where aquaculture is being discovered and moved forward by the greatest minds in agriculture in the world. This is all happening on the continent. This is all happening in North Africa. This is all happening in sub-Saharan Africa, in close proximity. You I think, begin to realize that you have the same innovative spirit that we celebrate in Cambridge, right? We've been, I think, of the same mind here, embodied in so many individuals and in a lot of institutions in Egypt and across the continent. When I went back to Egypt after MIT and just before the revolution, I was commissioned to look at a very specific question as part of a lengthy research study. The question is, why are so many PhDs coming out of African and Egyptian schools? Why are so many PhDs coming back from America, and yet the economy is not sparking? And yet innovation, academic innovation and commercial innovation is not being sparked. We're not reaching escape velocity in a lot of places, despite the hard work we are doing. I just want to say what my experience was and what my report looked like. There are social barriers to entry, and those social barriers are king. Right? There are gatekeepers, and they are closing their gates when they don't feel like admitting you into the space. And that is a social thing, that is an elitism thing, that is a control thing, that is a cultural thing, that is a post-colonial thing. It goes deep, and there are ways around it. We must facilitate networking and mentorship. We must adopt Endeavor Egypt's model to find success out there at the key moment, before it putters out, before it takes off, and say, I'm going to absolutely make sure that this goes the distance through the networks that I have personally, or through the grants and foundations that I have access to, or through the mentorship that I can line up. That's incumbent, I think, on every elite actor on the continent to hook up and to facilitate. We need to look at the gatekeepers and government officials and kind of sucker them in with prestige, right? There is this thing that happens in American politics that is not unique to American politics. It is true, I think, of politicians all over the world. Want to be seen, want to want to grab votes, want to grab opportunities, and you can bring people in to your mentorship or your networking ideology when you create opportunities for them to do that kind of prestige seeking in an ethical way. Which is challenging. Right? Because you can put someone up here and they can speak as a politician or its equivalent board or panel in Africa, but what happens after this equivalent panel in Africa needs to be what happens after the panel that happens here. And what that is going to be is networking, what that is going to be is idea generation, what that is going to be is admission into the corridors of power and the corridors of influence, and that's not always as easy in my experience in Egypt as it is here. The last, and this isn't happening here, and so I think it's an opportunity for Africa to leapfrog. We need to create public-private incubators that are full-service institutions so innovators can run. Innovators are ready to run, right? But innovators here, as they are there, are held back by the marketing, the legal, the accounting, all the things that happen when you need to take your IP and move it into a commercial idea, when you need to take your academic idea and get funding for that academic idea. There are a million things that professors at MIT will complain about that they never knew going in. When they got that $1 million startup fund to get their lab going, they never knew that they were going to spend 50% of their time raising money. I never knew I was going to spend 50% of my time doing things I did for overhead just to keep the ship running, right, and the political side. So all of these kind of overhead exercises can be taken out of the mix and we can kind of grease the rails and get innovators going. And I would wager to say that that doesn't happen in most of the American economy and most of the American innovation ecosystem. And so our opportunity in doing that in the places where we research and do work and where we get excited about economic development is an eminent one. So with that, I will finish up my remarks and begin introducing our auspicious panel. I also do want to thank Wara and Seating Lab so much for having me. It's an issue near and dear to my heart. And I don't think people look at a city councilor or look at a business owner and think immediately to themselves that this is a guy who travels to the African continent every year and gets involved in this type of research. It's something that's really special. And I hope we do more of it. First, we're going to hear from Dr. Peter Jeranyama, environmental physiologist, extension assistant professor at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Dr. Jeranyama's work in Zimbabwe and the U.S. is in the crop and soil science fields and focuses on irrigation water management and drainage systems, shade cycling, leaf gas exchange, and frost protection related to the cranberry industry, issues which influence production, environmental concerns, costs, and regulations. Dr. Johnson.
So, do I need to come?
You'll be recorded better.
Oh, okay.
Some of us are hard to hear.
Well, it's a pleasure for me to talk to you this evening. My primary responsibility at UMass Amherst at the Cranberry Station is to help the cranberry farmers within our Commonwealth to produce the best berry they can ever produce, with full of antioxidants, proanthocyanidins, and all those nice helpful properties that helps with our cardiac health, that helps with anti-adhesion properties, with urinary tract infection, and so forth. With my work, I'm primarily involved in assessing different genotypes of cranberries to see how do they optimize our photosynthetic capacity and how can that be translated into useful products. And I also evaluate those genotypes to see how adapted are they to cold regimes. Because for plants to survive in this environment, in the temperate environment, they have to acclimatize to cold temperature regime, which is called acclimation. So I assess different entities within the plant cell, say what are the biochemical products that are synthesized to enable the plants to withstand the colds. That is, what kind of phospholipids, what kind of carbohydrates, what kind of proteins are synthesized that enable this particular genotype to survive. and I do all kinds of lipid profiles and so forth, which is kind of nice and so forth. But then the question is, how does that relate to some of the work that I do in Africa? Well, primarily, I got my first degree from the University of Zimbabwe, and as soon as I finished, I was thrust into a national position, was in charge of a national research. And you can think of it at age number 23, you're in charge of a national program. And the guy who was supposed to mentor me was promoted, he was an assistant director, so he didn't have any time to talk to a recent college graduate. After 3 years, I realized that I really need some serious mentorship here, to help me to steer the ship. Fortunately enough, I got a fellowship with the W.K. Kellogg Foundation, based in Battle Creek, Michigan, and I went to Michigan State University, where I started my 2 graduate degrees, my master's and my PhD. Fast forward, when I finished my PhD, I went on to do a postdoc. But within my doctorate work, I was able to go back to Zimbabwe to do my research in Zimbabwe and also helping with some of the teaching in the University of Zimbabwe. And I was also able to work with other national agricultural research services such as in NAS in Zambia and in Malawi. So because the fellowship allowed me to be able to do that, and that fellowship was offered by the Rockefeller Foundation for me to do that. And then I came back to do a postdoc, and upon finishing my postdoc, I got my first academic position. Initially, in this was Saskatchewan, where it's very cold. But ended up coming down to South Dakota State University, and then ended up at UMass Science, where I am now. And through my professional affiliations, I'm affiliated with the American Society of Agronomy, the American Society of Horticultural Sciences, the Crop Science Society of America. We used to meet most of scientists of African origin in those international conferences. And each time we met, we would hear that there is a side meeting that is going on of scientists of Asian origin, scientists from India, but there wasn't any kind of a forum that scientists from Africa would meet. Then one of the, in 2007, when we were meeting in New Orleans, a professor out of Iowa State called Andrew Manu decided, hey, we need to sit down and talk over this, maybe we can come up with an association. And we gave 3 individuals to develop the association, but it never took off. So because it didn't take off, I called Andrew and the 3 people that we had selected on that committee to say, hey, what is going on? And they were so frustrated because people were not returning their emails or they were not involved and so on in the call meetings. So I decided I'm going to take the bull by its horn. So I called some core individuals, some 8 individuals, and I said, hey, look here, let's meet online, let's talk over this whole thing. So we sat down and we came up with some objectives on how this affiliation was going to go. And in that meeting, I was selected as the inaugural president of the association. So, as the president of the association, it meant that we needed to get this thing taken off, and we needed to find funding and affiliations. And then I remember my major professor had some individual whom you know at the Gates Foundation. I said, hey, do you think they'll warm up to this idea? So he said, yeah, you try them. So I wrote an email, and they said, oh, we like the idea. Can you develop a concept? So we developed the concept, and lo and behold, they were so excited about it. Come over to Seattle. Come and tell us about this whole thing. So we go to Seattle and say, okay, we're going to give you a planning grant for 400K. So they gave us a planning grant for 400K for the association. That's how we actually took off. And through this association, we've been able to go back to different African institutions, African Crop Science Society, different universities in South Africa, in Zimbabwe, in Malawi, in Ghana, in Senegal, in Kenya, in Ethiopia. So we've developed a core group. And one of the objectives of the affiliation was that we have to develop a database of the African agricultural professionals in the diaspora, especially those in Canada and the United States, so that we can pair them with different institutions in Africa that are needing their services. So right now, as I speak, we have a database of 2,000 individuals, And some of them have been able to send them to different assignments. But we also look for funding in order to sustain those kinds of activities so that they can grow from strength to strength. So as far as Africa, my take is that, okay, my area is food security, agriculture systems. We know that Africa, by 2030, it will have a population of more than 1 billion individuals, right? And we know that by 2050, the world over will have 2 extra billion people on Earth. And those extra 2 billion are going to need food on the table. And who is going to provide the extra dinner plates to feed the 2 billion? If you look at all the continents, the potential that exists to feed the extra 2 billion, it lies in Africa right now. So I see Africa in the next 20 to 30 years being on the cutting edge, being there to provide that extra 2 billion plates. But what needs to happen now is to position African institutions in such a way that they are at the cutting edge. This means mentorship programs to develop programs in universities and colleges and tertiary institutions. It means developing some value chain. We say agricultural value chain, for instance, food processing. Africa is the most youthful continent on Earth. The average age, you have a population of 60% of Africans between the ages of 1 and 25. I'm a very old man in Africa, because I'm more than 25. So you could imagine that there is a need for mentorship for those individuals that are less than 25. And if they are to be at that cutting age, they have to have certain tools for them to be able to deliver. So, and the thinking now has to shift to say, how do we help African youth to be at the cutting edge? How do we position them in the value chain? Innovation is definitely one of them. I'm quite sure there's not going to be as many agronomists trained like me as it stands right now in Africa. Most of them want to be in the urban environments because it's somewhat not sexy to be doing farming, to be doing agriculture. But still, they could be involved in the value chain, in agricultural value chain. They could be in agribusiness. They could be developing smart tools that can be used to help the farmers, to give them information for market purposes. We could develop some new technologies like seed systems or other things that can aid the farmer to be as innovative. So my vision for Africa is that 20 years, 30 years from now, because the average age of a farmer there is about 60 years old, and slowly they are getting diminished in the numbers. But there's going to be smallholder farmers, but their age is going to be much younger than 16, and they're going to be well educated, they're going to be at the cutting edge, they're going to be innovative, they're going to be using new technologies, but they need to be empowered in order to do that. That's why I like what the City Labs is doing, what WARA is doing, providing that the equipment which they need, the mentorship, the exchange programs, and that helps to expose and to cross-fertilize our African institutions. I think I will stop here.
I want to introduce Dr. Paul Mireji, Adjunct Scientist, Kenya Agricultural Research Institute, Trypanosomiasis Research Center, and Visiting Scientist in Tropical Medicine, Laboratory of Public Health and Epidemiology at the Yale School of Public Health. I'll say, please, Dr. Mireji's work in biochemistry, bioinformatics, tropical entomology, parasitology, and genomics includes research on malaria and trypanosomiasis. He studies the hosts of each cause of each illness, the mosquito and the tsetse fly, and is exploring vaccine and control effects for the latter. Dr. Paul Mireji.
Thank you very much for giving me this opportunity to present to you what you're doing and our contribution to research in Africa. I'll begin by just giving you an overview of pretty much what I'm doing in science, and then after that, I'm going to dwell a little bit more on our contribution in terms of capacity building in Africa. In terms of science, as you mentioned, I'm working on different areas like malaria and trypanosomiasis, the African trypanosomiasis. And in terms of trypanosomiasis, my focus right now is on immunity and on olfaction in the tsetse fly. The tsetse fly, this is the vector of trypanosomiasis in Africa. It's an insect that has a very unique biology and physiology that's quite different from all the other insects that have actually been studied so far. And in terms of immunity, our focus right now is trying to use functional genomics to understand the crosstalk between the parasite, that is the trypanosome, and the vector, the tsetse fly, so that we can be able to find a way in which we can be able to make tsetse flies that are more refractory to infection by the parasite, and therefore have population of the parasite that is the vector that cannot transmit the parasite through a system that we call population replacement, rather than giving the tsetse flies. And then on the aspect of olfaction, our focus at the moment is that most of the technology that has actually been developed to control tsetse flies have relied a lot on olfaction and vision of the fly, in the sense that the fly tends to be attracted to some odors. And when they're attracted to some odors, so these odors are actually applied to some piece of clothes or targets, which are black in color, which mimic the natural host of the parasite, of the vector. And the vector comes in, lands on this piece of cloth and picks up a little dose of insecticide, and that has actually been used effectively to open up a very big area of in Africa for us, and also for using the incidence of human African trypanosomiasis. So in both cases, we are trying to adopt very contemporary approaches in a way between Yale and institutions in Kenya, where we functionally characterize and molecular most of the components of the basic components of this interaction. Then we conduct the functional genomic aspect of this work in Kenya. And so in Kenya, in addition to the field work, so much that the science, the basic science of it, both transverses across these institutions. So we are not just with one party in the US and another one in Africa, but we're trying to shift most of this inside in Africa, and that's one of the reasons why we're here. And the other thing that we're also focusing on in terms of malaria is trying to understand one question. Are the mosquitoes that spread malaria, these are the ones that we refer to as the anopheles mosquitoes, are they adapted to urban environment? The dogma was that the anopheles, the mosquito that spreads malaria, is very sensitive to urban pollution. But one of the questions that we've been asking ourselves is why is it therefore that in the dry seasons in Africa, when we don't have a lot of clean water for these mosquitoes, where do they go to? And they only get water that's around. So we're also trying to understand the dynamics both at molecular level all the way to ecological level, so that we can be able to identify these spots that see the vector populations in the rainy season that then comes back and goes malaria. So those are the areas that we are targeting. By training, I did my basic degree in Kenya in biochemistry, and then I went on to do my master's degree at the University of Chicago. That's by coincidence. And then from there, when I finished my degree, I got an offer to Tulane University through an NIH funded program. So I came to begin through an NIH program. So I did part of my training at Tulane University. And then when I finished my PhD, that's when I started my initial postdoctoral training at the University of Cologne in Germany. And then when I finished from Cologne, I went to Institute of Molecular Biology and Technology in Greece. And then in Greece, when I was doing my second postdoc, that I thought of going back and doing some work in Kenya. And then I remember when I decided to go back to Kenya, then I got out pretty much back at the university. And I remember my professor at Tulane, but in Greece actually telling me that there is a tragic mistake. Because the only thing I can see you doing is just signing papers and documents, and you never do any research once you get back to Kenya. So I took a leap of faith, and I took a flight, and I went back to Kenya, and I was hired to teach in a university. And for quite some time, I thought that maybe he was right. Because he kept the distribution of creatives, and I don't coming back. And so I'm going to do distribution of the change the money back to Greece. So, but it was then that when I was there that I had this debate between myself of whether I should still hang around and just get back to the West. And during all these interactions back and forth, that in one particular meeting, I got in touch with one of my academic PI. She came into Kenya, we know each other, in a science meeting. And then back and forth, ultimately I decided I'm going to stay back in Kenya. But then she said, well, come and visit a lab occasionally for the amount of food that's going on. And so when I came over, initially for 4 months, now 3 years. But I go back to Kenya. So this is a joint program, and then coming was about 6 months in Kenya, and I spent 6 months in Kenya. And we've been able to do that, and which takes me to the next point, that is the purpose of this conference, which is on capacity building. One of the first things that happened is that in capacity building, we got some funding from the Canadian government. And one of the goal of this funding was to build capacity in trypanosomiasis in post-conflict countries. In post-conflict countries in Africa, we are looking at Angola, Mozambique, Democratic Republic of Congo, and South Sudan. These are countries that just emerged from the Civil War. And one of the things that was coming out during my tenure in Zimbabwe is that we have been able to establish this technique of reduction of the vector of the parasites of the vector of the Nmai. And one of the things that came out then was that our feeling then was that the trypanosomiasis, where the highest incidence of trypanosomiasis we had in Africa, were in areas where control had actually failed, primarily because there was no capacity during the war. And so when we came in and we said to build this capacity, so we put out a call, and that time we were only able to get around 8. We were able to get around 8 students from these particular countries, and so we put them through the training and trying to teach them new methods. Or rather, it was not actually new methods at that particular time, but it was existing methods of trypanosomiasis control. Another very interesting experience I had then was that I went to South Sudan specifically to see whether I could be able to get some students. At that particular time, we had some funding from, and we still do have some NIH-led global education science program training. And when we went there and told them that, well, we have some doctoral programs and we're very keen to have 1 or 2 of them on the program. And they told me that, no, I don't think that's not what we really need. And what we're looking for are people who can do so immediate programs. And the immediate program right now is diagnosis. We are running hospitals and our institutions, and we are not even parasites and getting to know what is going on. So we treat them for that particular strength, saying in that particular aspect. So we pretty much gave them a lot of technical training in terms of diagnosis and so on. So moving forward, we now got into the point where we are here, where we now have additional NIH funding for function capacity. And one of the things that we're trying to do now is to try to incorporate functional genomics in terms of addressing national problems. that is about analysis. One of the things that we are looking at is that whether we can be able to change the behavior and the immunity of these vectors in nature. And one of the things that was coming out clearly here is that there has to be a technology transfer. And the technology transfer being that as much as here there are advances have really been made so much, we're working with models, insects, and so on. And we knew very well the networks interaction, so Mireji facilitate this process. But bringing in those insects here, master reality, here in the United States is possible. It's something that cannot be done without running problem with the USDA and so on. So at the moment, our focus, or rather at the moment, the focus is now trying to see whether we can be able to train to transfer this technology back. And in the process, we will be able to train up to, and some still in the process of the 8 doctoral students that are involved in at the moment, and 2 postdocs who are at the moment. And my focus right now is a lot more on mentorship, much more mentorship. We are trying to see whether we can actually be able to mentor this particular cohort of trainees to be able to come kind of think out of the box and take leadership in this setting of the time. And my personal program again beyond this is trying to target usually PhD students and postdoc students in Africa. And my goal here is to try to train them on 2 things. One is grantmanship, and the second aspect that we are trying to look at here is because of the grantmanship, we never be able to do much exactly what we want to do. And the money we need to have, and that's now where we started partnering with Nmai. We were able to supply, we were able to get equipment for at least one university in Kenya. At the moment, they're trying to see whether we can be able to help other institutions in Uganda. Because the network that I'm serving as a director of this particular program is called the Eastern African Network. Eastern African Network of Internationalized Research and Training that encompasses almost all of the countries in Eastern Africa, the countries that have been affected by internationalization. Those are the key points that we are trying to work on. Another thing is still trying to see whether we can build capacity in terms of working together with those, trying to see whether we can actually be able to lift the levels of editorship of the African journals, because a lot of publications that are done in Africa, but they all never get to the part, to the mainstream readership in the West. And these are some of the things that we are working on those, trying to see whether we can be able to work on that one as well, and also trying to see whether we can be able to get aspect of exchange and the values in the customers. So with that, I think we're able to take any questions later on.
Thank you. And with an eye on the clock, we will hopefully still have time for questions. We started a few minutes early and had excellent discussants, but it would be good to stay for a few minutes after if you can make the time. Lastly, we're certainly going to hear from I took you out of order, I'm so sorry. Dr. Nmai Bulley, Assistant Professor of Geography in the Borough of Manhattan Community College and in the City University of New York System Chair of the African Section of the International Association of Landscape Ecology. Research focuses on the interactions between land use dynamics and the natural environment with an emphasis on sustainable water resource management and adoption of geospatial science and technology. This work has included water resource applications of GIS and remote sensing, landscape ecology, land use, and land cover charge at rural-urban fringe, spatial modeling, and web-based GIS.
I had to remember what my dad said. Stop being I'm listening to the other speakers and I said, maybe I'm going to turn this one off. I just want to start my talk by going back to Travis and say, yes, it's not New Africa. They've been doing it, and I just want to take a moment and recognize my late mother. When I was in college in Africa, and World Bank started talking about recommendations with the Mokola woman in Ghana, and some of us said, they don't get it. Because those women are smart, they were running a credit system. I came to the US, actually Canada first, and I said, that is what they were doing. They give out the products and pick the money up bit by bit, and every month there was good money in our house. And people didn't get it, and I just wanted to recognize that part of the African woman, and I couldn't help but say, I remember good old mom. You could see I'm a my name is Nmai Bulley. Sometimes the middle part doesn't come there because it gets jaw breaking, and then when my middle name is gone, people don't want to know where I'm coming from. Henry and Bulley, combine the two. I'm going to talk about making geospatial technology and ICT work for resource management in urbanizing Africa. And I think some of the premise of my talk is pretty much being highlighted in this room. Rapidly urbanizing Africa, things are changing, ICT becoming a platform that is bringing us together. And thank you to all my fellow panelists sitting there. They've all agreed to showcase all my webinars, so I'm really proud that I got some connections today here. I'm with the City University of New York. I've been with Clark University, Central Connecticut State University. But a question that was asked earlier, why is it that we have a whole lot of PhDs in Africa and nothing seems to work? And at the Borough Community College within the City University of New York, I'm hoping to learn something because I did my PhD in Nebraska. And what I learned, actually before I came into the US, is the power, the innovative spirit, yes. But what drives the power, we talk about the Midwest, sometimes it's not on the East Coast. And I'm thinking, sometimes you're missing something. You can pick the research, but how does it translate to the people on the street in such a rapidly urbanizing Africa? And that's one of the things that is driving me to explore this. But let me come back to my talk here. My research background, as you mentioned, was geospatial technology, understanding land chain dynamics. For the purpose of today's gathering, I did it, but for previous times I've been studying and coming up with innovative ways to sort of assess snow in the Himalayas. I used to do that. I used to call it my day job, and then in the evening I work on Africa. Got to bring my voice down, right? Sometimes I got to move this thing back, and I'm okay. You can hear me better now, but maybe it has to go into. Yeah. The point here is, I started thinking, if I want to make an impact on Africa, I have to make this a full-time job instead of just an outreach activity. So for these research ideas and research interests, I've started making them applicable to what I do in Africa. When we talk of Africa, or the Serengeti, who doesn't want to go on a nice vacation? If I ask who wants to go there, if I give you $20,000 next summer, I'm going to have all the hands here. But Africa is changing. Take a look at Kigali, the city website. Now, you might think about Rwanda, and the first thing that comes to your mind is Hotel Rwanda. But thanks to innovation, this is what we are seeing as Rwanda arising from the genocide. Globally, the world population, the urban population is growing. And you can see here, the rural population is pretty much reducing, not just in Africa. So if this is a global phenomenon, let's look at what is happening in Africa. You could see the trend, 1.2 billion by 2050. That's a projection. But if you're going to have all these people move to the cities, we need to be able to be preemptive. We need to find a way to make sure we're not just managing the resource, but having these people be sustainable in their workforce. be able to live in a way that they live in harmony with the environment, add climate change to it. And that is what is driving me when I do some of these things with Africa. So, I put up Lagos. This is what we know about Lagos on the right. And this is Eco-Atlantic City, the concept that has been developed for Lagos in Nigeria. And this is not just with Nigeria. Ghana had the tech city, and it's going on all over Africa. Here, in the Democratic Republic of Congo, you could see my French is not good, but the city du feu, the city of the water. And I decided to put this in perspective so you can see not just a picture, but that's what they have it. Now, a city right by the water, have there been any considerations of potential pollution to the water body? Or is it just because somebody figured, nice water vista, I built something there and come live in there? So instead of waiting for these cities to develop and then going to try and fix it, what I'm hoping is African scientists, and that's my background as landscape ecology with geospatial science, will be involved in modeling and helping land use planners and managers to sort of think ahead as the population is increasing, as Africa is changing, to be able to sustain these cities as they build them. So some of the things I've done have been with the Africa chapter of the International Association of Landscape Ecology. And just like the first speaker, my advisor had actually organized an international conference. And when we looked around, there were 3 African students. Every part of the world was represented. And since 2003, every now and then I want to have someone else take over, and they say, no, you can't move until it's sustained. And I have to be say, this year is really taking off very good. One of the things I do lately had been bi-monthly webinar series, thanks to a little grant I got from the European Union. And what I do here is I bring Africans together. Africans collaborating with Africans, and also Africans that are working with people in Europe and in the US. So each month we have a technical presentation and then what we call a project showcase. So Africans tend to learn and see who is doing what where. Actually use the platform to make the connection, not just listen, but make the connection. Oh, is that what you're doing? For example, I'm going to have a I'm not good with name, but the doctor that does that malaria work, I'm going to have him make a presentation. And as we do that, we broadcast it so people that are interested in that work, they come in and they start talking about, you know what, this aspect of your work, I think it may help my work, and we provide a platform for a month for collaboration. And this is in the spirit of capacity building, because what has been happening is you have 2 people, sometimes in the same African country, working with the same professor in Berlin, and they didn't know each other, but the one in Berlin knows them. Then you have another instance, 2 people, they know each other by working with 2 different professors, one in Europe, one in the US, replicating work, and after 10 years, they have to restart the whole thing. What we're trying to do with this is leverage the power of information technology to bring the researchers together. Last Friday, I had 2 gentlemen, that's this particular webinar, one gentleman from Nigeria but based in Malaysia, and another gentleman in South Africa. They made a presentation, and in the process, I've talked to Moses, Dr. Cho, for the last 6 months. I bet he's seen my website, but when he was done, he said, you know, we tested a couple of machine learning algorithms, and we need to find some people to help us do it. And I said, that's what I do. So then we said, oh, really? You didn't know that? Okay, in November, we're going to have a Skype discussion to see where I can play a role in what they're trying to do. And this is what we're trying to do, sort of coming to learn and understand each other's work. The other part had been, you can publish very well, but how do an African get access to the publication? Out of these discussions, we get to know who is doing what, send each other some publications, and also, and I think this goes back to what Warren does in City Labs, support open access publication. So people who publish about Africa will pay to make it open access. So when African scientists are looking and they see an article, they go, Okay, I can get access. Not click, pay $35, forget it. And then they even forget that was a good paper because there's a financial consideration. But hopefully with time, any paper in the US, in Europe, in Africa that is published that have anything to do with Africa will have open access. And when we do that, African scientists don't have to wait on their colleagues in the West to sort of send them copies of papers so that they can continue. And in most cases, once they see the manufacturer, forget it. Let me find those that are available. And they may be missing a good nugget of information in those papers that have restricted because you have to pay for it. The other thing that I'm doing, I sort of got myself into a double bind here. But next year we're having a world conference. In 2008, it was done in Wageningen. We supported 22 African scientists. Unfortunately, when they came back, that was end of story. One just wrote to me a year after and said, I have a chance to go out. I have some money if you can help me go for a conference. And I said, I'm not a conference organizer. What I'm interested in is capacity building. And here we're going to have African scientists and others working in different places. If you see my collaborators, they are from Uganda, the US, Turkey, in Finland, and somebody said, how do you work with them? I said, they do the good work in Tanzania. So this is what I'm doing with my colleagues. And what we're doing here in this conference is, for those Africans who couldn't get to Oregon, we're going to have a live link. Instead of having to hear about the conference the following day or watch it on YouTube, they're going to get a chance to get it. That's where the WebEx platform comes in. They will listen in real time, and then they can have the chance to ask questions, even though they couldn't get there. Because for all the money we get, the scientists that they want to go there, we might not be able to send them there. We want to leverage ICT in this area. The same thing happens here. The same workshop, I have others again doing modeling. There's a landscape change modeler, a powerful modeler, sort of looking at different scenarios of development, of what the impacts are. We're going to have a workshop. Hopefully we'll have enough African scientists there to have a hands-on, but again, we're going to give the opportunity for those who couldn't go to actually participate live with the seminar workshop. The second part that is of interest to me is, we all talk about how mobile phones, cell phones are exploding, technology is exploding in Africa. At the same time, we tend to hear the naysayers, is it going to help Africa? Instead of thinking about what could be done, they look at the very bottom and say, no, you know, this can't help. And for good reason, I decided to blank their face here. But the mobile discarded, is it going to really help Africans? And I'm going, they've got it. How about we think of what can we do about it? So perhaps, you know this slogan, yes, we can. And the reason why I put that there is, it used to be if you live in a village, you have to have a relative in the city and travel maybe 2 days to get to the city to get that money that your uncle's brother, sister's cousin's husband sent to you, and it's only $20. But that's a lot of money. Today, you just go to the village corner, get your cell phone, they find out the money, they give it to you, you're on your way. No travel involved. You could do some farming, productivity. Now, if people are doing this, and that was one of the questions, I've been doing this with water resources assessment, but there was one lady at the presentation last Friday who was saying, we're developing a program and we want to see, is it possible to sort of get data from cell phones? I said, yes. Well, but they don't have smartphones. Yes. But how do you do it? They use the cell phone towers, we triangulate. There's a little bit of mathematics, but we'll do it. If they don't do that, they use the GSM that goes to the satellite. And when it gets there, that's my happy home. We can do it too. So what I'm doing here is, with the power of geospatial technology and ICTs, I think besides booming economically, we should be in a place to support it with that technological analysis, modeling, so that we don't have people develop things and then later tell them what you did is wrong. Actually work with them. And the webinar is one of those leveling platforms because there you have scientists and resource managers, and like you said, in Africa you have to give some people the due. They need to feel respected. So that's a wonderful platform that I bring them in to talk about the good work they do. And in there, you don't have to make an appointment. You don't have to wait 2 weeks to see them. Right there, you make the connection, you write the name, and the next chat is not calling a person, but you meet again on that platform. When they come to the platform one-on-one, because I have it open for 1 month, you get to ask and make the connections you can. But they get recognized in the first place. So that's what I'm trying to do. Cutting edge research I'm doing, but I think the most important thing is bring it to the level of everyone that benefits out of it, because Africa is not determined by the scientists or the rich men. It's the people that are walking out there, and if they're all moving from the villages to the cities. Like one of our speakers said, who is going to grow the food? And are we interested in just having GMOs go to Africa? Who is also going to manage the place? And this is where I bring my geospatial technology, maybe people skills, because I'm thankful to my fellow speakers that they're going to showcase on this platform. But that is essentially what I'm trying and hoping we can do. How do we make it work? And with water and CD labs, I think there's a solution. And the answer, I believe, with all your help, is going to be, yes, we can. Thank you.
Very much. I'd like to have an abbreviated kind of 10-minute question and answer rapid fire. Keep the panelists to quick answers and keep you all to quick questions. Can I start in the back and work our way forward?
My name is Kwame Panford. I teach at Northeast University, and I spend a lot of time in universities in Ghana. I've been doing this since maybe about 1991. My question is anything in response to the last speaker's idea about the phones and all those things. I think a lot about the phone, but I also remember when I was a kid, first there was the radio, then television, and now the phone. We were told those times, and we are still being told, those would be the solutions to Africa's problems. The question is, you can't do webinar, you can't do internet, you can't even get electricity in some of these places. So how are you going to work with people? I think Africa is missing one very important thing.
Can I take your first question there and have you address it?
I don't think it's a question as such. I think it's something that we need to factor into all these things. How do we get our governments to work? Africa misses one very important thing. America, Korea, all those places do the nice things we associate with them because their governments were responsible in providing appropriate infrastructure. I'm not talking about liberal democracy or the right to vote.
I'm going to take your point and ask for quick responses,
So
and then go to the next question,
because
if I can.
no matter your good
I appreciate
intentions,
what you're saying.
I'm getting there.
Okay.
No matter your good intentions, if at the university people are not promoted on productivity, but on tenure, how long they've been in the position, how do you motivate them to do research?
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I think from Ghana, I would just have to say, the last 6 months or so, I had a drive and temptation to write a strongly worded editorial to the mayor of Accra, when he said spending $200 million is going to fix the flooding problem. And I spent so many nights just checking how many research had been done. That tells me if you don't relocate certain people, it's not going to work. And I had to take a step back, but work with some of my collaborators in the CSIR. They said, yes, we remember, I had a doctor when I was going to Canada to work on the Densu River, but it got changed. And I'm working with my colleagues there now. We might want to go to the government, but most times, it's not just the government. Somebody said, it's those people sitting in the non-government institutions that have built castles to themselves. We tend to look at the central government, but we have these people in their own offices that won't let things go through. So what we're going to do now is have a modification of the houses model like here in the US. Let people see this is what is going to happen. We did it with my students in Connecticut. When we have a 100-year flag, this is what is going to happen to you. People look at it and they admit, okay, maybe we need to relocate. How do we do it? It's going to come bit by bit. If we can dismantle those little things, the government, the bigger government, is usually us.
Thank you. I will go to the questioner sitting here in the middle. Yes. As you ask your question, I'm just going to start collecting some of the question cards so we can take one or two of those before we close. So I'm just going to be in the aisle, and please just pass your question cards to me while.
And I have the cards, so if you are interested in getting some more, if you have further questions, motion me
I was
over.
thinking about what you've seen in Chinese investment in your respective industries, what that looks like.
Sorry, did you say Chinese investment?
Yeah, and whether that's like positive or negative.
Chinese investments. Okay, in agricultural terms, Chinese investments in most African countries has been informal for buying large tracts of land. And most of the deals are done in a very shady way, in a very non-open way, and there's a lot of suspicion on what is going on, because you find large numbers of villages being moved away, and now there's this large-scale farm that is going to be doing wonders for everybody. So until issues of land tenure and land use hold, those things are dealt with, we're still shortchanging the owners of the land, and they're not deriving the maximum benefit out of that. I just wish they could be more transparent in how they do their transactions.
My quick response to that would be the response of Ghanaian scholars to a Chinese professor who said Ghanaians should be happy that Chinese are investing in the mining industry and in the logging industry. And the question they ask is, if you're going to take the logs and put them in a closed track, do you call that investment? So as you mentioned, if you have investment that are open and not investment just to extract material, then we'll talk seriously, because what is going on is not necessarily investment, but money to extract resources back in pre-colonial days, and there are people who really take issues to that. Most people don't call it investment, most people call it poaching. Just to be blunt about it.
I think by this, the Chinese investment has been more on practice from the Kenyan perspective, has been more on infrastructure, but we have not seen much investment coming in health and education.
Good. Okay, I'd like to do the question on my card, at least one, maybe two short questions from the audience. We have very quick closing pitches from the hosting organizations so that we can understand the nature of the project they're embarking on here, and then we will close briefly. It shouldn't be too much time, and I appreciate your patience with the schedule.
So if you look at the Forbes billionaires list in America, 10% of the names there are college dropouts. How can we talk about capacity building in Africa, where I'm from Kenya? Dropping out of school is basically a death sentence. What kind of capacity do you have outside of formal education for people to succeed?
From my perspective, that's why I decided to join the Borough Community College within the City University of New York, because I believe there's something that is done here that we can learn from, because we tend to focus on the very higher end, and like you said, those who drop out, they don't have a very good way to really help them to become effective participants in the economy. And I think, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but I'm hoping to learn some knowledge of wisdom in how that is done to keep people as part of a productive economy.
Well, we can have a question.
Oh, just a quick question. I found this webinar is fascinating. How do you deal with the bandwidth problem, or is it not a problem?
Yeah, there's an option. You just pay for it. They will call in. So if they can't do the video streaming, they will call in and then they listen to it as a radio or as a phone call. But then that is something we pay at our end to get it.
Okay, let's have two questions from cards. The first one, given the governments in African nations have very limited financial resources, how do you think they should prioritize funding in different areas of research, health, and education? No problem, right?
Ministry of Central Planning.
I think one of the things that have come up has been a question of ability to educate a particular percentage of the GDP to research and something like that.
We're We're hearing from a scientist. The answer is research. Okay.
My answer to that would be Kigali. The president is a scientist. He understands the value of science, and he's really opening up his arms, asking people not just to come and develop, but develop the scientific capacity of it. And the Rwanda we know 10 years ago is not what is coming up. So I think that model will be very effective if other African countries will have the courage to replicate.
As far as agriculture and food security is concerned, African countries came up with a module called the Comprehensive Africa Agricultural Development Program, whereby each government is to allocate 10% of their budget to agricultural production, food security, things related to that. But out of the 54 countries, only 4 have achieved the 10%.
Wow.
So that money goes into research, development, value chain development. Which for, I believe it's Rwanda, South Africa, maybe Kenya, and Ghana, I think.
No.
Probably Nigeria is on its way. Yeah, on its way.
As I go to trade conferences, there's this tendency right now to garner the investment, but give away the farm. So South Africa has cut all its ties and is in the process of reestablishing trade agreements to get out of some of those. But I think there are real opportunities for governments to actually get organized and for the folks that are coming in and making money off the country to use it for the social service operations that are so critical. So we have one that we're going to advocate for education probably around the world. That's a structure that will work long term, and then also self-identify by a signaling system where the opportunities should be. So I think, quite frankly, using the technology and getting rid of some of the corruption, China's actually starting to do a better job of that than Africa, and Africa needs to sue. I mean, the comments about corruption, even when it goes right, nobody trusts something that goes well in Africa. So it's a huge part of allowing.
Let's get move to a card question.
Okay, sorry.
Last question of the night. I look at what is going on with Ebola and the Western response of providing technical and medical help. How do you see seeding labs taking part, having and helping, I think it's supposed to say, Africa help themselves?
I'm happy to answer that question, I think. The news out of West Africa is pretty chilling, of course. But to me, what it brings home is it underscores the importance of investing in infrastructure. Right? Not just, our colleagues in Africa are not just responding to crises. Right? They are, as we're hearing, doing work that is over the long term, that builds over generations and decades. Right? And part of that is being on the ground and having capacity to do this work long before something tips over into being a crisis. Right? And that's, I think we've heard time and time again from the panel tonight, that this issue of capacity building, what that really means is having the infrastructure, physical and human capital on the ground prepared long before anything becomes a crisis, to identify what that is and to be able to be there on the ground to be on the front lines working to tackle it. Because as we've seen, these are not issues that necessarily respect geographic boundaries on the map. They come to affect us all. And our colleagues who we've heard from tonight, many more like them, building that capacity is absolutely critical.
And if just out of completeness, you want to pose a question here or vice versa to get the WARA take on something topical and recent, I think it's only fair, and then we'll do the pitches.
I'd be happy, I'm the director of WARA here in the U.S., to say something about Ebola. We have a number of researchers and members who are involved in looking, a number of researchers and members who are involved in looking at issues that are coming out of this Ebola emergency. We have people who are members who are in Sierra Leone, or Sierra Leonean, Liberian, people in Senegal, in Guinea, and we as an organization in the beginning of September prepared an open letter to President Obama and then got it to the Senate and to the House committees. And we like to think that that had something to do with the upping of the U.S. response, because it was a very weak response. And it suddenly went right up. I'm sure there are a lot of other people lobbying too, that this was very important for us because we felt that, this is a really major emergency and we really need to activate all of the resources that we have, not only because it may come here and has, but because these are important parts of, this is an important part of the world. And it's very important that we stand in solidarity and offer the resources that we have. There's a lot of interesting things about Ebola that reveal things about global politics. I mean, if you look at where Ebola is hitting the hardest, it's exactly in post-conflict regions and areas that have experienced extreme conflicts recently that have really also had an effect in breaking down what healthcare systems existed. So these are places that really need our assistance. So we, as an organization, are working. We have, medical people, we have sociologists, anthropologists, political scientists looking at this from all the different angles. And it's a very critical issue for us.
So for final words, final pitches to close out the evening, first we have from Seating Labs, again, Nina Dunn.
Well, first I think we should thank our speakers. And our all of you, I think we've had a couple of extremely thought-provoking and provocative questions, and I know you have many more, so I hope you can stick around and have a chance to talk to all of our speakers. It's been phenomenal to have all of them with us today and learn a lot more about their work and about, as we said, this interconnected community of researchers and scientists who are working together to solve problems that affect not just Africa and not just crises, but some of these important fundamental questions that are ongoing, that face us all ultimately as a globe. And making sure that our colleagues have the resources and the tools to do that is what Seating Labs has been committed since we were founded. And as I alluded to earlier, we have already, with your help and many other partners, provided equipment and training to 15,000 scientists, like our panelists tonight, in 22 different countries around the world. We have this, providing them with this support is absolutely critical for this variety of reasons as we've heard. We have a model that works to do this. The demand for it is absolutely unprecedented. In the last 2 years alone, Seating Labs has heard from scientists in 147 countries, 147 institutions in 40 different countries. As I said before, talent really is absolutely everywhere. Being able to provide that talented pool of individuals around the world with the equipment and the training and the connections that they need, in order to invest in all of them, in order for them to have the highest impact that they possibly can, we need you. Tonight, as Travis McCready from the Boston Foundation alluded to, we are collectively kicking off a fundraising campaign, 48 hours, set your watches now. And what I'd like to invite you to do is visit this website. It's givingcommon.org/October 7th, and come and make a donation to both of our organizations. In particular, donation to Seating Labs right now. You will be joining the Boston Foundation, our partners at Millipore, and our board of directors in sponsoring 3 20-foot containers of lab equipment to almost 2,000 scientists and students in Southern Africa and South America. Collectively, they are working on expanding access to clean water for thousands of people. They're working on nutritional supplements for infants and children, better treatments for malaria, which still infects hundreds of millions of people every single year, better diagnostics for tuberculosis that impacts 1 billion people worldwide. You can be part of bringing that research to fruition. You can accelerate that work. Please visit this website. You have met a number of board members and staff members of Seating Labs who are still around the room. You should have received some cards of other ways that you can get involved. But first, before you do that, please visit this website and join us today to support talented individuals everywhere. Thank you so much.
Finally, we'll hear from Jim Kamara on behalf
thank you very much. I've really enjoyed this evening. I have learned a lot from my colleagues here this evening. We've been fed both physically as well as intellectually. And so I appreciate what you have shared with us very much tonight. As the treasurer of WARA, I know the kind of challenges that we are facing. I'm glad this last question was asked. The region in which we are working is a region in crisis. It is an immediate need that we have to support the ongoing work with our colleagues throughout the region. Unfortunately, here, we tend to have this common idea of West Africa. When you go out here, unfortunately, people think of West Africa as a country. And the entire region gets painted with one brush. Our work is work that goes on the ground in West Africa with our colleagues there. There are hundreds of applications that we have to support our colleagues and scholars who are crossing those borders, exchanging information, plugging into the kinds of conferences and work in laboratories throughout the region, but don't have the support to get there. That's the work that we do. The innovation and the innovative ideas and research that we heard about tonight, the information sharing that occurred, these are all important. But for our work, it's most important that we take the I out of innovation, the I out of that. Because it is only through our collaboration, through our efforts, through our input there in the region where our money goes, specifically in West Africa at this time. We're urging your support. Here is the address. It is possible. I come from a particular experience, which is part of the cross-cultural sharing, where the evening, which was free for us, I think everyone got the flyer, that was for entry. You see, to leave, we all must make a contribution. That's part of the experience I have, at least, called the Black Church. It's free when you come in, but everyone has to make a contribution. Now, you can do that with check. You may go to the giving common. You have 2 days. We don't want to tell you that, but you can't go at this address. But we most appreciate the effort, the energy, the commitment that you've made to come share this evening with us, and we know that you will continue to make a commitment and share with our colleagues in West Africa. Thank you.
I want to say one thing by way of closing, and it's just that I think when someone is told to give, they immediately decide how much they're giving, whether they're going to give. And I'm asking each of you who has already decided not to give, to just give $5 or give $10 or give whatever you spend on a sandwich, because volume matters in these things and because it will increase your predisposition to share on social networking and to remind others tomorrow when we've forgotten about the wonderful things we've done here. It will predispose you to sharing and continuing this excellent work. For those of you who are thinking of giving 50, giving 100, for those of you of means, this is certainly a worthy cause, because you have to understand the way that something like this is set up, that when you give, your gift is multiplied through the work of other philanthropists and through a project like this. So I'm definitely hoping and urging that everyone here does their part, whatever size and import that part might be. I want to thank our audience. I want to thank our speakers. Organizers and our organizations, WARA and Seating Labs. Thank you again.